Hi, everybody. I just want to start by saying it's really such an honor to be here. And the path that my colleagues and I got on to get us to places like this was very random and kind of out of the blue. I wouldn't say that we're the usual suspects to have gotten so involved in regenerative agriculture and the regenerative ag movement as a whole. So our mission is inspiring and advocating for the restoration of soil worldwide. And I just want to tell you, I was asked to tell a little bit about our journey and how we got here. So a lot of what we ended up doing is telling stories, and I'm going to get into that in a second. But the question was, why kiss the ground? I just want to go back to when we started. The guy in the picture with me is a gentleman named Ryland Engelhardt. He's a friend of mine. We've known each other since we were about 2 years old, from upstate New York. And he was in New Zealand watching a conference, and the panel of the conference was debating, scientists debating, can human beings sustain themselves on planet Earth? And a majority of the scientists were saying, well, from the information we have, it doesn't really look very good for us. And the last gentleman on the panel was a guy named Graham Sate, and he agreed with all of the science, of course, that the other scientists were talking about, but he brought up something, which was the soil, and Ryland hadn't heard of it, and he came back to Venice, where we both live, and he was like, well, this is something that I think is really exciting, and just so happened that Graham was going to be coming through Venice, and we hosted a little event for him, and in the span of 4 hours, my mind was really blown, and the trajectory of my life was changed pretty much immediately. I had considered myself a pretty avid environmentalist, usually on the forefront of what's going on, but somehow, at the time, I had lived my whole life and not had the equation of soil in the equation of the climate change and what we had. So what we talk about this now is it's really, for us, it was seeing a new reality. We had been shown something that was brand new that changed the equation of how we were looking at climate change. And it was so inspirational for me as somebody who wants a future for humanity very badly to see a hope that I'd never seen before. So that same night we went back to Ryland's house and we all sat down and said, well, we got to do something. And first we kind of just said, let's get this out there. You know, we looked for more and more media online, and there wasn't very much at all. This is about 2.5 years ago about the subject. Several conferences where people were speaking, angled camera, where you're like, I can't really tell what the guy looks like. What is he talking about? 12 views on YouTube. Great material. No one cares. So this became the immediate call to action for us. And immediately that day we committed. We said, we have to help with what we have. And we're not ranchers. I don't have a farm. I am not a scientist. I'm not in the lab doing the research. But we live in Los Angeles, and we're out in the community, and we were touched and inspired by this subject. So we committed, and we put Spider-Man's uncle, or Voltaire's quote, with great power comes great responsibility. And that to us was, we're in the city, the media capital of the world. And we took on the responsibility, if we're here, even though we're not in the film industry, even though we're not in that business, there's ways that we can be in this place and declare that here in Los Angeles, we're going to do all we can to spread this message. So we started dedicating Kiss the Ground's time to telling stories. And but first, I took on for one, knowing that we were in a group of brand new people. We met in Ryland's living room every week. It was crazy. It was like starting a nonprofit. We didn't even know it was going to be a nonprofit. We were just meeting, being like, we're trying to figure this out. There's some possible solutions. So, 50 people would meet every week, and it was crazy, completely insane. So I took it upon myself, and several others in the group did as well, to really dig into this material. And before we started really jumping out on a limb to tell this exciting news, we needed to find out more information. And what we found was an incredible platform that we could stand on. And I feel so honored to be here and to be talking about this subject, but I really want to acknowledge Alan and the countless others who have spent years and years and years dedicating their time. Because as soon as we were electrified and dedicated to telling this story, if when we dug deeper there wasn't anything to stand on, it would have gone away. We would have probably been discouraged and not had the guts to go ahead and do the research and I'll find out the promising news. So I wanted to see if anyone in the room who's been in this sphere or in this research or doing farming that's regenerative or sustainable or holistic can just stand up. Anybody over 10 years or over, anybody in the room can just stand up so we can give you a round of applause. That'd be great. Anybody who's been in it for more than 10 years. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Debt of gratitude. So I don't have too much time, but there's going to be a bunch of lectures, I'm sure, about how amazing soil is. But when we dedicated to telling the story, it was a different route, I think, than some people who go into science or someone who's already in the field being a rancher. So it was kind of great to be able to find those little nuggets, those pieces of information that really blew my mind. And it was so fascinating. I think one of the coolest moments for me is, of course, meeting Alan last year, and also last year got to meet Christian Nichols, and she's the person, for me, it's like when I was a kid, I had baseball cards and fans. If I got to meet Mickey Mantle, Ricky Henderson or somebody, I would have freaked out. So I felt like I was meeting these people like, you're the person I've been researching, and we're talking, and you're telling me more than I already knew about mycorrhizal fungi, for example, which are just insanely epic. And the cool thing about, like, the deeper you go in this subject, it's so fascinating, and the story is so good, and that's why, Jonah's right, there is so much room here. Looking at nature, 500 million years of research and development since plants, not fungi, but plants came onto land 500 million years ago. They've been developing a perfect technology. These are concepts that, to me, when I really got that this is evolution that's taken so long, and we're counting on research for stuff that's happening in the GMO world that's 15 years old. Nature's been doing it for an effing long time, to put it frankly. So there's just some of these things I like to look at. Like, I was telling a woman from the NRCS the other day, after our campaign ran this summer, she was like, tell me some of the nuggets or how you tell this to people. And I just was like, well, one of the things I tell people recently is, like, a tree is made out of thin air. Because even though it was taught in schools that photosynthesis creates trees, but like approximately 95% of the tree is from CO2 that was from the atmosphere, the carbon that builds that tree. That's amazing. And then the soil is also built from carbon from thin air out of the atmosphere. And it was interesting to hear from her being like, well, that was the quick version of it, but she said, when you're in this business all the time, you don't necessarily get to paint the picture. And she was just saying that it was interesting to hear it from that perspective. So these are things that we geek out on, and I said bacteria don't even get me started. And basically, nature's technology is amazing. And if anyone hasn't done it, just go in there, read about mycorrhizal fungi, read about these things as much as you can, because trust me, it's addicting, I guess. So I want to talk about making the soil story. And like I mentioned in the beginning, we do wish we had had more coaching in the beginning, but we just went on this path because we knew we had to do it. And there were many trials and tribulations of getting this piece of media done. When it finally did get finished, we had many versions that were kind of over the top and budget crazy. And finally, when we got it finished, we had a pretty simplified version of it. But we realized that we had to start somewhere. We couldn't keep delaying this process. And we had to, the bare bones for us was getting this piece of information that I just kind of shared with you. Is like, trees are made of carbon, humans are carbon, there's carbon in the atmosphere, there's an issue with too much carbon in the atmosphere, we can put it somewhere. So we finished the video. It took a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of money, actually, to get it finally done. But when we were about to release it in June, end of June, I work with I'm the policy director for Kiss the Ground, so I was working very closely with Sacramento, and Sacramento had just decided to delay the funding for cap and trade for California till the end of August. And so we thought, why don't we do a campaign where we can tie this video with the funding, the 3 programs that could be funded for helping soil. Funding for composting, funding for Senate Bill 367 for regenerative ag, and then funding for the Governor's Healthy Soil Initiative. So that was our plan, and we went with it. And this is the soil story, and I'll tell you more about the campaign when we're done. But is the volume up for this? We're plugged in here? Nope. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Jason Mraz. Did you know that California is sitting on a solution to help reverse climate change and fight the drought? We need you to sign this petition to allocate $160 million to rebuild California soils. Please take the next 4 minutes to watch this important film my friends at Kiss the Ground have made that teaches us about this solution.
Do you feel hopeless about climate change and the damage we are doing to our planet? I did. But then I was shown a new way to look at the problem, which made the solution so obvious and so within reach. A solution that's right under our feet. Climate change is all about too much carbon in our atmosphere. But carbon's not our enemy. It's the building block of life. Everything alive is made of it. It's us. The problem and the solution are simply a matter of balance. Let's step back and look at the 5 pools of where carbon is stored on planet Earth. Starting about 500 million years ago, when plants appeared on land, carbon began to cycle in an amazing balance, a balance that allowed for life as we know it to evolve. Then one life form, us, figured out how to extract carbon from the fossil pool. Then we burned it for energy, putting it into play, disrupting that balance. The way we manage land and do agriculture is moving even more carbon from the soil and biosphere into the atmosphere. Specifically, we've moved 880 gigatons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which is heating up the planet and destabilizing our climate. Now the oceans have absorbed a lot of this excess carbon, which is resulting in ocean acidification and accelerating a mass extinction of sea life. So in order to save life as we know it, of course, we have to stop releasing fossil carbon. The big question is, where do we put this excess carbon to get this cycle back into balance? Well, remember when I said that the solution is right under our feet? It literally is. It's the soil. Plants, with sunlight and water, perform photosynthesis. They pull in carbon from the air and turn it into carbohydrates, sugars. Then they pump some of those sugars down through their roots to feed microorganisms who use that carbon to build soil. Voila! Carbon moved. Plants pump it in and soil stores it. Nature's living technology is amazing. Scientists have recently discovered that applying a thin layer of compost sets up an ongoing positive feedback loop that brings more and more carbon into the soil each year. In concert with other regenerative practices like not tilling the soil, planting trees, cover crops, and planned grazing, we can build and retain gigatons of soil carbon. This is carbon farming. This is regenerative agriculture. And there is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. Unlike more carbon in the atmosphere, more carbon in the ground is good for us. It makes healthy soil, which is nutrient-rich, full of life, and holds way more water. This means more nutritious food and crops that are more resilient in the face of drought. That's good news for farmers, families, and everyone that eats. Remember this. The way we grow our food, fiber, and fuel either puts carbon up into the atmosphere or it pulls it down into the ground. The regeneration of soil is the task of our generation. Our health, the health of our soils, and the health of our planet are one and the same.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching this.
Share this video.
Live it.
Join us.
Thank you so much. Okay. Next slide. I guess I'm going to have to do it here. So it was what it was. Again, we put it out there. We tried to get it to as many hands as we could. And the campaign, to me, the campaign was the best success of it, was seeing how with this dedication, we brought the message to Sacramento in a new way. And we were honored to have communication from people like the Secretary of Ag saying, thank you for a new type of tool and a new way of communicating this. We got over 23,000 signatures for the campaign. The result of the campaign, just to let everybody know, the legislative session pushed the votes for the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, or the cap and trade funding, till January session because the session was so overbooked. They waited till the last minute. So that happened. We're still waiting on the vote, which means we can put more energy and more time to getting those votes. So keep in touch with us about that. What's next for Kiss the Ground? We're putting together a kit for internationally so that the soil story is accessible. Versions that don't have narrators in them, that are just narrated, they'll be accessible for other languages and done in other languages, as well as infographics we're working on with the NRCS that'll be available that tell this story in one page and several others. We can give you more information about that. We're going to Paris to share this. We're really excited about that, working with several groups to be there. We're starting a regeneration campaign, and I want to just touch on what Joan was saying again, is we have a big opportunity here to tell stories. And what was just shared about that rancher who gets up in the morning so early, these are stories that we can tell and we can help tell. So we're going to be producing, by the end of the spring, 6 pieces of media that are telling these stories of the farmers and of the ranchers. Because to us, the things that we did miss on the soil story, which is more just about the science, are those heroes' journeys, that we're getting to have culture connect with agriculture in a brand new way, and it's totally possible, and it can be really inspiring. We want you guys to be our stars, to help us tell those stories. So stay in touch with that so we can work together. We're making a big film, Kiss the Ground, the movie, that is doing that on a really big scale. We've already raised half of our budget. We're going to the next phase of it. We've done a lot of the filming. We've got Alan Savory and several others on the film. We want to make sure that goes. If anybody's interested in funding the big project, we're still looking for the second $500,000 for fundraising for that, if you're up for that. And then beyond California, there's a lot of stuff that's going on in policy we're very involved in. We're looking to start working with Chris and the Savory Institute on a lot of policy work together. We'd love to represent, I do a lot of policy work for Los Angeles and around composting for the state, as well as regenerative ag, getting it sponsored and getting subsidies for all of these great practices at the Sacramento level. So stay in touch about that. And I guess I'm going to end here pretty soon, but I wanted to share a little bit about why I care about this. And it has taken a big chunk of my life in the past 2.5 years, of course, as it has with you guys. And we know what it's like to get the bug of this. But for me, there was a moment where I had a dream a couple of years ago that really set the tone for me, that changed how I was looking at my life and the future that I had to lead and what my responsibility would be. I was an old guy in my dream. I was living in Brazil in a refugee camp. And global climate change had wreaked havoc and the world was in a very bad place. And I showed this picture here of similar to what's happening in Syria right now. As many of you might be aware, the beginning of those, the reasons for that situation is largely due to the droughts and agriculture mishaps that have happened there and the loss of soil that has caused a huge farming community to be displaced. just a reminder. So anyway, to get back to this dream, I'm in Brazil, and we're in this refugee camp, and my granddaughter leads me under the fence, and it's the dawn, and we travel a while, and we finally get to this city, and she looks up at me, and the city lays in ruin, and it's just devastated city, and she looks up at me, and she says, "Why didn't you do anything to stop this from happening?" And it was a really shocking dream, so I sat with it for a long time, and I had a tune I was working on, and I wrote this song I want to share with you guys. It's called 2060, and it goes like this. In the dark of night, when the fears take flight, I fell into a dream. I'm still haunted and cold, and it shakes my soul to say what I've seen. It was the summer 2060. I was an old man, one of 12 billion men, women, and children in a sea of sand, in a sea of growing sand. A frail young child, my own granddaughter, led me from the throne. We marched through doorways of endless sorrows as she sang this sad, sad song. It's too late to hope when the world begins to bleed. It's too late for love when our hearts are filled with greed. She cried, "Oh, Grandpa, on the way to this hell, how did you justify that these wrongs were right, or these actions might not be what bring us down? It was in your power to shift it all." Well, I lay frozen in shame till the morning came, when I felt my lover's kiss. And to my surprise, as I opened my eyes, she described a dream of bliss. It was the summer 2060. We stood hand in hand. The planet flourished, each soul was nourished with peace throughout the land, with peace throughout the land. Ooh. Oh. And all the children born free and fearless shared the same desire, all for each other, sisters and brothers, sang in a universal choir. It's too late to bleed when hope has freed the doves. It's too late for greed when our hearts are filled with love. And it's in our power. It's in our power to make it so. Thank you all. Thanks to Alan and everybody for all the work you're doing and the work we're going to do together. Thank you so much.